Hey everyone, Twisted here with the Open Sorcery, and today we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about offering spiritual services for money and whether that is moral, right or wrong, and all different aspects, present both sides of the argument. And, after doing so, if it is something that you have not necessarily thought before or have pondered for yourself or are currently doing, you can decide for yourself whether it actually is something that feels right or wrong for you. And I think that's kind of like where we should go ahead and start this off is that, like, by no means are we trying to be authoritative one way or the other, and recognize that when it comes to anything, you know, it is all about what is correct for the individual themselves. Now, Devi, you yourself, you happen to go ahead and offer your own services. I believe the platform is Keen, right?
Yes, the platform is Keen, and I do my tarot readings, psychic readings, like all of that, that goodness there, right?
Yeah.
But I understand the argument because for the longest time, I actually had the opposite. Um, I had the opposite stance on it. For the longest time, I was like, I would never do anything for money. I would never do spell work for money. I would never do readings for money and everything. But for me, it was personal gnosis with a goddess of mine that she's just like, "What are you doing? This is fine. Like, what are you doing? This is fine." And I was just like, "Okay," and kind of went in there with, "Okay, I have permission. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what that I don't know. This is what I'm supposed to do." It just is what it
Oh yes, yes.
is.
And in regards to, you could say, like, at the time of us meeting, right?
Hmm.
And, like, I definitely lean more so, even currently, to the side of, like, when it comes to most cases, offering spiritual services for money are not necessarily all too good of a thing to do based on the individual who is providing them. And, of course, you are an exception in that regard. And I would say that several other people that we know are exceptions in this regard based on, like, how well I know them and, like, their own intentions of, hey, look, they're going and looking to do it for being able to provide benefit to others as the primary reason.
Hmm.
And then, like, okay, you're getting money as a secondary sort of thing, right? It's a secondary mutual benefit, and all that sort of thing. Now, I would also state that there are also several people that we do know that offer spiritual services for money. And I'm like, yeah, they probably shouldn't be doing that. That's not necessarily all too good. And to go ahead and note that it's not necessarily just based off personal bias of how, I view a person or not, in terms of whether I see him as a friend or not. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, Now, when it comes to the notion of why I personally view, in many cases, seeing different people online, like, whether it's a store or, like, on different apps and different social media services offering sorts of, like, okay, I'll do tarot readings or spell work or, this, that, and the third for, amounts of money. Or you could even say, like, even when it comes to, like, possibly retreats and stuff like that, or, like, bigger chunks of money for, like, physical experiences, right?
Hmm.
You know, a lot of times, at least from what I detect, and this is my own personal perspective, and, your perception makes reality, is that it just seems that they're coming from a genuine place. That the way that's marketed, the way that's put out there, because I myself, like, I've been around people who've done marketing, and I would say not all too much, but I have a little sliver of experience when it comes to sales and marketing.
Hmm.
That, the way that they're presenting it is money first, and then the spiritual stuff is the means in which to attain said money, as opposed to, like, okay, we're providing a service for the good of an individual, and the money is following secondarily. um I guess the way to put it is, like, in a book that we both have read within the past few months, The Language of Creation by Jonathan, well, not Jonathan Peugeot, it's actually his brother Matthew Peugeot, or Mathieu Peugeot. I'm not French Canadian, so I don't know how the hell to pronounce that correctly at all times, but but in any case, right? Like one of the things that's stated in there is like for things to work properly, right?
Hmm.
In terms of that worldview, that the heavens are the intangible force that goes ahead that and informs the physical, the tangible, right?
Hmm.
So in that sort of sense, you know, if you're offering spiritual services, right, and the express intent is to do good towards other people, to go ahead and be like, all right, I want to bring benefits. I want to bestow divine information that people may need in a synchronistic manner. Whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
then the physical follows. Now, I went on a bit of a spiel right there, but would you say that sounds a bit accurate of like how it should be approached or not?
I would say yes. And in terms of that, like I have definitely seen the profits over people. I've seen people charging upwards of like $40 per minute. And I'm just like,
Ooh,
holy crap. Like,
ooh,
how do you even justify that? Um, because
talk about
honestly,
burning
I
holes in
couldn't.
pocket.
I can't. I can't justify that. I'm just like, no, no, that's not okay. Um, I would say that, yes, that is accurate. You know, it is bringing the divine into the physical space. Um, but I'm not gonna lie, it does require a lot of energy. It requires, like you said, intangible, right?
Yes.
And you know, we don't necessarily have like energy meters on us. We're not like the Sims, right?
Oh
But
yes.
I'm gonna tell you, whenever we're doing, readings or like interacting with people, interfacing with people in that more spiritual way, it is draining. And not only is it draining, there are times where, like, I've gotten sick because I did readings for people, or I have felt just extremely ill after the fact, and I've had to like go cleanse myself with like either go take a shower just to get that nasty ick off and cleanse that way, or like smoke cleansing. Like, it sounds like, oh, you're being a prima donna, but I swear to you, some people's energy is so pervasive that it's like this tsunami that just washes over you and tries to destroy like the positive space that you've built. Um,
Oh yes. So
so
I guess in a way you can say, there are the benefits, but there's also the cons as well to take into account.
absolutely. And yes, like for myself, and I can only speak for myself and those that may have like minds, my initial response is okay, I am here to help people. That is what I'm supposed to do. I've spoken about cups and being a cup, like even on TikTok. I've talked about that several times. And, our purpose in this life or in our practice is to heal others. I can't heal others from my home if I'm not put out there somehow. And I can't be here to help heal or facilitate the healing of others if like there is no way for people to know that I exist. So
Oh yeah.
how does that work? And in addition, everything in our economy runs on money. There is like not a single way that, I could live a comfortable life for myself, for my kids, for all of that without having to have like a monetary equivalent for my time on there. And really,
Oh
I
yeah.
think that is the part where people get confused and people kind of get off track because it's like, I'm so valuable, I could charge like $1,000 an hour, $1,000 for like 30 minutes, and I'm just like, how about you don't?
Or like at least I can, like, even if it's not necessarily those high amounts, like I've gone ahead and seen online, like say Yeah, okay, you know what, $5 for a card or something like that, right? Just playing out, right?
Mhm.
But the thing about it is, like, even if it is a lower amount of money, right? It's
Mhm.
like I can detect, okay, this person is doing that with the primary intent of trying to use tarot, to get money, and like the trying to help others is not necessarily there. You know what I mean? Like, or at least
Absolutely.
it's reduced.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not going to knock anybody's grind because for some people, like literally, that is what they need to do. And they need to charge like whatever they're going to do. Right.
Like,
Um,
yeah. Or
but
even like you can even say the hokey like sort of stuff, right?
oh,
Like
yeah.
the like gimmicky sort of stuff of like, oh right, for a spell, like we've been talking quite a bit about readings, right? But let's say for like spell work, right?
Hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and charge $22.22 or $33.33,
Yes. I've
or I'm
seen a
going to
lot of that.
charge or $666.66 and stuff like that. It's like,
Hmm.
come on,
Well, no,
man.
I've seen a lot of that, and I know people are trying to draw others in by using like, okay, let's use the numbers there because a lot of people know about angel numbers and synchronicities and things of that nature, which we've spoken about before. And they're going to try and draw people in using that, being like, "Oh, this is a sign from the universe and from my angels that this is the one that I should choose."
Oh yes.
But they're using the gimmick against people. No, I don't feel like that's right. In terms of spell work, I'm okay with people charging for it, honestly, because if we're being 100% honest, in spell work, there's cost for the herbs, there's cost for your time, because your time is valuable, right?
Oh
There's
yes.
cost for like if you use candles or um, threads or whatever ingredients that you have. It's not just a um like, oh, I found this in a park and this is what I'm using to do this spell work. Most of the spell work that's being done is like it is ingredient heavy, it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort. So I understand people charging for it. I just think that a lot of it is like really outrageous prices.
Oh yes. And you know what? And you talking about the actual physical materials that are required a lot of times to go ahead and do that sort of thing. Um, One point I did want to raise is that I think it's pretty clear for both of us that, say, for example, like, so not only do you do tarot readings or go ahead and do like spell work and all that sort of thing, psychic stuff, what have you, in terms of your array of services,
Hmm.
but you also have an Etsy shop where you go ahead and you're like, you know what, you have physical objects, physical tangible objects,
Yeah.
in which, you can talk about a couple examples of, but like, you're going ahead and providing tangible objects, not necessarily doing spell work or any sort of spiritual sort of thing, right?
Hmm.
With it, but you're going ahead and having tangible physical products for tangible physical money,
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. And I think it's pretty clear that, that's okay and kosher by any sort of measure whatsoever. I don't think that can really be contested or anything like that. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, it's very simple stuff, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and be like, "Ooh, this moon water from February, it was under the sign of, oh god, what sign was it under?" I had that written down, but I can it's on a shelf somewhere. I don't remember.
yes, yes,
But it was under a specific sign which helps with X, Y, or Z, and you can use it for like spell work that's associated with it. Um, like I'm not going to be there charging like $50 for water that I charged under a full moon. Like absolutely not. Like I that's ridiculous.
yes,
But I do have that on there where I'm just like, okay, like $10, you get a vial of moon water. It's like 5 ounces, I think, 4 to 5 ounces.
yes,
I'm trying to remember the exact measurements of the bottle itself. And oftentimes I'll include like some crystals and stuff as an exchange. Like just be like, hey, you get extras. But also just tools in general, like for cleansing, for ridding your space of negative energy, or like I just put on a full moon bath. So it's like a bath tea, and it comes with oils that I have mixed and prepared myself for that specific purpose of cleansing yourself and charging yourself for the full moon, right? So it does take time, it takes effort, it takes ingredients, it takes physical products. Um, but you know, I don't understand people charging an arm and a leg for it, you
Oh
know.
yes, 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 most definitely. And yeah, that's what I think it comes down to, right? It's like, so to go ahead and talk about previously what I say of like physical objects, getting like, you're paying, dollars and cents for,
Mhm.
physical tangible money and all that. You know, me and myself, I would say that part of my own perspective, my own philosophy, where the issue of like, potentially like, once again, this is based on the individual, right? But just generally where I was coming from beforehand, and for the most part still now, is, you know, say there's like digital software out there, right? Or say it's something that is not necessarily a tangible object, tangible physical object, software, music, things of that. My own perspective is like, hey, look, you know what? Like, why are we trying to go ahead and exchange something non quantifiable for something quantifiable and that sort of thing? You could
Mhm.
say like compartmentalizing in that sort of sense.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so not just with like, music or like, but like films, all that sort of thing. But when it comes, okay, I know exactly what I can go ahead and use it for since I talked about music, right?
Mhm.
So you go ahead and you get a digital album that is like, oh, it's on like iTunes or, Spotify or someone's bootlegging or whatever, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know, you should go ahead, that should be free, right? That should be available for free. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with CDs or, any sort of physical mediums like vinyl or, what have you.
Mhm.
But, in terms of like, okay, you know what, you're going to a live show where an artist is performing, that's a tangible experience. You're there, you know what I mean? Like you're
Mhm.
getting into a physical location and all that sort of thing. Then yes, I definitely believe that if you want to have that sort of experience, that sort of thing, that money is in fact warranted and
Mhm.
all that, because you're trading something that is tangible for something tangible. You know what I mean?
Yes. But I mean, technically, our currency is already digital, so I am going to throw that one out the window.
Oh
And
yes,
I'm
yes,
going to
of course.
disagree with you because, like I've said before, people's time is valuable. It takes time to be able to make the music. It takes time, effort, skill, talent, whatever you want to call it, for the actors to perform in a film and get the character correct. It takes time for the songwriters to write their lyrics and get the perfect tune. You don't know how much effort actually put into that, or was put into
Oh
that.
yeah,
So it's more of like, I understand like the tangible for tangible thing, like exchanging a strawberry for $1, right?
oh yes,
So something you can physically hold for something you can physically hold, but majority of the spiritual is not going to be tangible. It's not going to be something that you can hold. It's going to be experiential, which I do believe is worth um, putting your money towards. Um, Not only that, but apparently there's been studies like that you're happier whenever you're spending your money more towards experiences than things.
oh
Um,
yes.
but that's more so like in terms of like, oh, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to visit a place, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, versus like, I'm going to buy a pretty rock. It's which which we have a lot of in the spiritual community, right?
Oh
Um,
yes.
but there is a difference. And I do believe that people's time and effort does need to be rewarded, because you don't know, one, unless you ask them, like, how long have they been practicing. And some people, like, they've literally been in piano lessons since they were 2, right?
Oh yes.
So they have put their whole life into their music, or whatever that they are doing. um, so I do believe that it's okay to spend money there. I just think that there is a lot of extortion inside of the spiritual community over like what the prices are. And
Oh yeah.
I know there is an attitude of the more expensive it is, the more worth it is, which I
Oh yeah.
highly
Oh yeah.
disagree with.
Now, back to the whole like one thing you were talking about, like actors going ahead and putting in time in the movies. I did want to go just state as a singular example of like there's definitely a drastic difference between going ahead and like having a digital copy of a film, or like say you're watching on a streaming service or what have you, and like actually going to a movie theater and going ahead and having that sort of experience where obviously physical installation of not only the big movie screens and all that, but the surround sound. You go and you get yourself some popcorn or whatever sort of snacks, and
Oh yeah,
that sort of
overpriced popcorn,
experience,
absolutely.
yeah, backed
Yes.
by the physical sorts of things. Um, but yeah, like just generally speaking, like I know that there was one thing in our preliminary conversation or preliminary like putting down a little bit of bullet points that you did want to state in terms of uh, the law of equivalent exchange, which I personally learned
Yes.
from Full Metal
Oh
Alchemist,
yeah, that's
and
where it
is one of the building
originates.
blocks of my perspective. But you go ahead and elaborate a little bit more so on that, please.
Okay, so law of equivalent exchange. Of course, we know that from Full Metal Alchemist because that is quite awful. Well, quite obviously an
Yes.
awesome show. Um, and let me find the quote real quick.
Oh yes.
Let's see. Equivalent exchange. People cannot gain without sacrificing something. You must present something of an equal value in order to gain something. That is the principle of equivalent exchange in alchemy. In the early days, we believed that to be the one truth of the world. From Alphonse Elric, of course.
Oh yes.
Because, props. But
Yes.
it was such a
Props
good
to a
anime.
fictional character. Yes.
Yes, always. He will always be in my heart. Um,
Ah, yeah.
but taking that, yes, we do have to have equivalent exchange. It's just like at work, an employer employee relationship. You are selling your time for a specific price. Um, so I do find that to be very much true. There is also scientific um, backing to this in terms of like chemistry, law of conservation, law of definite proportions, where, you know, you must use a certain regent mass in order to achieve a certain product mass. Like it's going to be equivalent, right? And of course, law of conservation of energy in physics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred between two forms. Um, so it's this equivalence does need to be balanced out. And I do believe a lot of it is unequal inside of the market that we have presently. Even just in terms of like the spiritual surge that there is, right?
Oh yes.
Because I'm sure you've seen the ridiculousness that I have
Oh
seen.
yes. Yes. The spiritual surge. Which in previous conversations, not necessarily on the channel. Well, maybe there might be a mention of it on my part, but um, at least in like personal conversations, right, or with like our friend group,
Hmm.
that there's a lot of people who are in it because it's a fad, right? It's like the thing that's going on right now that it's popular, you could say, right,
Absolutely.
or at least more popular than it used to be. And like a question I pose quite a bit is, all right, so we got people in here who they're going ahead and they weren't necessarily into spiritual topics or subjects beforehand, and for whatever reason, they happen to be like drawn to it, they've been exposed to it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that, okay, just because they're doing it now that they're ingenuine. But the question I pose is like, all right, so out of all these different people and that sort of thing, how many are still going to be sticking with it 5 years from now, in
Oh,
terms
absolutely.
of, yeah, exactly. How many people are still going to be, whether it's like going ahead and say doing spiritual services for money, or say they're going ahead and, you know, doing it for free, but it's just part of their everyday life, like at least at the current, moment, how long are they going to keep that up for? Is that something that they will continually do? Is it something that they drop? Are they like, just, shallow in terms of the, not necessarily from a moral standpoint, but like if you want to use a pool analogy of
Hmm.
like they're only grazing the shallow end, but they don't go into the deep end, and all these sorts of questions, right?
Oh
And I
yeah.
think the same also applies for like, in terms of why, someone is involved in spiritual pursuits or anything, you know, whether they are in it for long haul or not, in terms of performing the great work, or even if it's not necessarily the end goal of this particular lifetime, crossing the abyss, escaping the wheel samsara, as it's phrased, all these sorts of things,
Hmm.
that they're just trying to develop and enrich themselves by these sorts of like modes or practices,
Oh,
modes
absolutely.
of being and practices. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like, God, I hate to say it, but there is a lot of people who do not genuinely believe in this out there. There is a
Oh
lot of
yes.
people who are quote gurus unquote, that have large followings, that one, they're not going to practice what they preach, and they don't genuinely believe their own words, and that's where
Oh
it
yeah.
gets into that scary almost cult leader mentality, um, which quite frankly, like that shit terrifies me. I'm just like, yeah, let's stay away from that. um I'm just a person. I have some of the extrasensory stuff, and I can help. I can help heal, I can help guide, but that's about it. I'm just the old crone. Let me be the crone.
Oh
That's
yes. Yes.
that's that's
Yes.
my
And
attitude on it.
oh yes. And, I think that's a good point to go ahead and put across is like, whether it is spiritual services for money or just anybody who is trying to put themselves in a certain position, or like be like, oh, I'm of this value, and they have to outwardly say it and beat it on their chest and all that sort of thing, then you might want to go ahead and raise the eyebrows like, but are you really though?
Oh yeah.
Because like if you are, then why do you have to say it outright like that? And also like in terms of trying to take someone serious, right? Like and all that sort of thing, there are intimidation tactics that people utilize when it comes to providing spiritual services for money. Like, I've gone ahead and heard of and known of accounts of people going ahead and saying, oh, you know what, like I'm offering services for free as like bait. And then they go ahead and it's like, oh no, like, I did this reading for you. Like, you better give me some money, or I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hex you. I'm going to curse you. I'm going to do some sort of malefic or baneful spiritual practice
Oh
or
yeah.
act towards somebody, or like even if the price is put out there forthright and all that sort of thing, if someone just denies to pay it, then they'll go ahead and still try to strong arm them in that sort of sense, as opposed to just like let it go. And that sort of thing for me in my eyes is by no means kosher whatsoever.
Oh no,
But
that's not okay. Like even, and we talked about this earlier, like with the firing of clients, right? Um,
yes.
just because I am going to fire a client and I'm going to say goodbye, like I am no longer working with you, um, it does not mean that I have the any ill will towards them. It doesn't mean like, oh, I'm gonna put a hex on somebody. I'm gonna, stuff you in a jar and just shake the shit out of it. Like, no,
Yes.
that's not what it is. It's maintaining that practitioner to client relationship and being like, hey, it's not working out. It's okay that it's not working out because we're not making progress, but at this time I'm going to have to say goodbye.
All right, so yes, in going ahead and you talking about that, I know rather recently, you were talking to me about like an experience where it's like, you know what, like it was not conducive for you to go ahead and continue this sort of client, reader relationship.
Hmm.
And not to get into that specifically or any of the specific, like, um
That's their
sort of
privacy.
breakups, you can say.
Yeah.
Yeah, not none of the specific ones, but like I would guess for anyone who in of themselves is trying to go ahead and provide services out there, whether they're doing actively or potentially thinking of doing so, or are clients themselves and like, all right, let me go ahead and think about how I should approach a reader in terms of like um being too overbearing or doing something that is like crossing boundaries and all that sort of thing. What can you think of as like some sort of guidelines that you would put for
Okay.
both a reader and a client in maintaining a healthy sort of relationship, you could say?
Yeah. So in terms of like being the reader itself, guys, if you do not feel comfortable ask or like answering a question, tell them no. No is okay. It doesn't matter that yes, they're paying you to answer the question like uh just spitballing one off the top of my head like asking somebody about like an intimate encounter and it's just like, "Oh, I am uncomfortable going into that. So I am not going to answer that question. Do you have any other questions?" And no is a perfectly acceptable response. Period. End of story. Um if like I know I work with my guides a lot and kind of have them as the intermediary, so I'm not completely flooded with somebody else's energy for the most part. And if they're telling me no, this is not good, I will go ahead and be like, "Hey, I'm sorry, things are not working well over here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end the chat." Um, and that's also perfectly acceptable. You don't have to subject yourself to negative experiences just because money is involved. That's really the main point for readers. For those that are seeking a reading, one like if it's not something that you would ask in terms of like a friend to do, why would you ask a reader to do it? Why would you ask a reader to sit there and look into potentially traumatic experiences and then relive that and have to give you details? Like that's unkind. Listen to them when they tell you I'm not okay with this. Take no for an answer. No is okay as an answer. Of course, if a reader is being super pushy and the reader is pushing your boundaries, just shutting off the chat is a perfectly acceptable response. Um,
And
now,
depending on service, you can leave a nicely worded review.
well, yes, you can always leave a nicely worded review. Um, I will say, just because you didn't get the answer that you wanted is not a good enough reason to leave a bad review. But
Oh
people
yeah.
are salty. People are very salty.
Oh yes, yes.
Um, and it's going to happen. And I'm sorry if I don't see what you want me to see. If it's not in the cards, I'm not going to say it.
Oh
Um,
yes. Well, that's actually a good point to make. Of like, when it comes to someone doing a reading, like, so, once again, by my own observation and perception,
mhm.
Debbie here goes ahead and when she does reading, she's giving you the 100% honest truth that she can detect. No bullshit, no BS, nothing like that. I can even say like in regards to like reading she's done like for like free, like say like for me or for like other people that are part of our friend group that we know and like acquaintances, all that sort of thing, right? Like she will go ahead and you know what is it that your cards will go ahead and bitch slap someone, pretty much.
Yes, my cards love to bitch slap people. They will bring to the front things that you don't want seen. And you kind of have to be okay with that because I am a healer by nature. My cards are an extension of me in that. And I'm going to bring up things that are not great that you need to focus on and work on.
Oh yes, and that can apply to any reader, anyone doing any sort of spiritual services, what have you. And I guess like in terms of the reviews and thing in of itself for anyone, right? Like, just because you are not getting what you want to hear, but it is you could say what you need to hear, you know, you should go ahead and like, take some time to clear your head, breathe in, breathe out, and all that sort of thing, and be level headed to go ahead and give a proper review if you feel so compelled for whomever it may be giving the reading or doing the spell work or what have you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cuz if I'm going to sit there and get like if I'm getting a reading, I'm going to kind of meditate on it a little bit where I'm turning it over in my mind. I'm like, okay, how does that apply to whatever I asked or whatever I need to know in that moment? Most of the time it's, either my own deck or somebody else's deck, just like keeping that pen pan strong, just like
Oh
bam,
yes.
this is what you need to know, this is what you need to focus on, and you know this and you have been ignoring it, and I'm just like, I'm sorry. But it's more of, think about it, because a lot of times, even with like, if somebody is a medium and they're speaking to maybe relatives that are passed on, it's not something that you're going to understand in the moment, but it may be a few days later, and then all of a sudden that light bulb goes off and you're like, oh my god, that happened, how did they know that? And then
Oh
you get
yes.
the kind of like that moment of gnosis, where like everything kind of lines into place and you understand what the reader was trying to say. And I mean, it happens all the time, and it is what it is.
Oh yes. And I think another point that should be made is, especially in these particular times with good old inflation continuing to blow up like a good old balloon, right? And the devaluing of the dollar, these sorts of things, right? That, you could say that when it comes to uh, spiritual services from money, reading, spell work, all that sort of thing, right? Like they can be helpful for you, most definitely. But I think all of us have to prioritize, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have to understand, like, hey, look, whatever sort of amount of money you have, if you're going ahead and wanting to get a reading, but you might go ahead and not necessarily have food, for a few days or whatever the case may be, like you really got to go ahead and consider, is this something that I should be doing based on the amount of money I have? And,
Mm-hmm.
depend like what are your reasonings for going into it, and what are you going ahead and potentially exchanging for, the actual reading and services you're getting, because money is an avenue to get, different sorts of tangible things or intangible things, but it's an avenue, it's a medium, you could say, just like you're going ahead and you're talking to a medium for, different sorts of services, right?
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
tapping, yes, and either it is an intermediary, because we are not in, the good old days of uh human, history, and having, like, trading in direct bartering systems. That's why money in of itself, whether it be physical or digital, what have you, was created for. So yes, like, I think we should all go ahead and, like, before entering into, like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna go get a reading or get spell work done or whatever, like, can you afford to do so,
Absolutely.
realistically speaking? And for everyone, that sort of, like, whether it's realistic or not is different.
Absolutely. I also want to put another addendum for readers on here. You do not read people unless you are invited to do so. Period. There has been cases, and I will give context. There has been a one of the like a really popular creator on TikTok.
Yes, yeah.
She just recently lost her son. He was killed,
Okay, yeah.
and people were doing medium readings of his soul for clout.
The hell?
Yeah, yeah. And so like I let me broadcast the message that I put out on TikTok. We have to be invited to be able to do these kinds of services, whether we are paid for them or not. You do not just put people's business out there. You do not contact spirits for clout. You do not we don't do that. Our purpose is healing. We don't speak for clout. We speak to heal. And that is literally our purpose. And I'm that one actually made me so mad seeing all that going down. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely no bueno. This is my first time hearing about it. Like, you bring it up or anything, and I don't necessarily use TikTok. Hence why Debbie here is the star of the show when it comes to the TikTok arm of the opener sorcery and all that. But like hearing that sort of thing, like yes, respecting people's boundaries and going ahead and asking for their permission of like, hey, can I go ahead and do this for you, whether it's paid or for not, and just yeah.
Yeah,
I think
that's
that clearly
oof.
speaks for itself.
I
um
fully agree. And I think we've covered a lot on here. I think we're
oh
beating a
yeah,
dead
yeah,
horse at this
sure.
point. Um,
Oh yeah.
was there any other thoughts that you had to add?
I think we pretty much covered it. Yep. Yeah, we're good. We're all kosher. So, yeah, do you want me to go ahead and sign it off, or you want to sign it
Close
off?
it out for us.
All right. So this has been Twisted, and along with me is Devi. Oh, before we go ahead and close it out,
Okay.
yeah. So since this particular one has been about spiritual services for money, and we did talk quite a bit about your own services and all that sort of thing, let's go ahead and give you the opportunity to shill. Now we have links on the channel, of course, but for you to go ahead and do so in the actual audio recording. So yeah, go ahead, take us
Okay.
away with that.
Okay. So on Keen, it is Mystic Table. On Etsy, it is also Mystic Table. Either one of those, I'm on just about every day. Take a look if you wanna. I'm not forcing nothing. I didn't do nothing.
But yes, definitely appropriate based on the subject matter in of itself. But yeah, yes. Aside from that and the little, all that sort of thing, this is Twisted and Devi with the Opener Sorcery, and stay frosty, Neguses. Peace.
Have a good night, guys.